verbal messages, nonverbal messages, and emotional messages. The common thread between all of these messages is that they occur within conversations, our informal social interactions. We greet a friend or a coworker. We get a phone call. We walk in the door at the end of the day and we're met by our roommate, spouse, or partner, and we have a conversation. So we need to take what we have learned about verbal, nonverbal, and emotional messages and learn how to have better conversations. Now, when I say we need to learn how to have better conversations, I'm referring to the common theme we have connected to in all of these videos: choice. Before studying interpersonal communication, most of us would probably have to agree that the interactions that we've had with others, our family, our partner, or our coworkers, have just happened. But by examining theories, principles, and skills of interpersonal communication, we can now make a choice about how we will have conversation with others. My hope is that your future conversations will be more rewarding. I want to talk about having more rewarding conversations by talking about onions. Conversations happen many times every day, but if we could use the onion to think about conversations, hopefully it will slow us down so that we remember that every conversation and every part of a conversation is a choice. Onions remind us about 5 choices. First, onions teach us that we should think first before beginning a conversation. The first words of an informal conversation can set the tone for the rest of the interaction. Onions are strong and must be approached thoughtfully. Conversations can get off track and headed for derailment simply because of how you choose to start. So remember that messages are about creating and sharing meaning. If you want to get somewhere productive, make sure your verbal and nonverbal beginning to the conversation matches where you intend to go in that conversation. It might be totally casual or serious or instructional. Just begin in a way that matches the intent of the conversation. Second, onions teach us that you should proceed cautiously with conversations. With onions, it's always best to just peel back the layers one at a time. Conversations should be a process. You begin and then purposefully work toward where you're going. One key concept is called feed forwarding. This is when you prepare the other person for conversation with a short preceding statement. An example might be, instead of just launching into a difficult conversation, you begin by saying, "I have some important news to talk about. Can we sit down and talk about that now?" You get a better reaction from others by proceeding cautiously and introducing the conversation you want to have. Third, onions teach us that you should think about the other person more than yourself in conversations. Wow, isn't this true about eating onions? It is a great way to be reminded that interpersonal communication and sharing messages should always be more about the other person. Conversational messages should be dialogues and not monologues. They should be more about introducing a subject and then listening and engaging the other person than seeking to score points like some competition. Whether eating onions or having a conversation, think about the other person more than yourself. Fourth, onions teach us that you should remember to clarify in conversations. If you're eating onions with your meal, you should remember at some point to ask if your breath is offensive. Now, think about how your conversation would change if you simply asked questions. Ask if you're making sense. Ask if you understand the other person. Ask to make sure you haven't accidentally offended the other person. In other words, seek to clarify what is going on in the conversation. If you have offended the other person, take responsibility, apologize, and seek to continue that conversation in a positive and polite note. Before I tell you the fifth choice, here's the final exam question. Be able to identify and define the concept of feed forwarding. Fifth, onions teach us that you should finish well in conversations. After eating anything with an onion in it, it's best to pop a mint to finish off the meal. It's just the polite way to end. With a conversation, you should also end it well. Some things to remember when you finish a conversation. Make sure you're both on the same page. After all, you are attempting to create and share meaning. Conclude by reviewing what you got out of the conversation. Ask the other person if they have any questions. And finally, end on a positive note. A fresh note, if you will. A great piece of literature, the Bible, reminds us to not go to bed angry. We should do the same with conversations. Make choices in those conversations. That way, we can enjoy and end our conversations in a rewarding fashion. See you in the next video.